You made a decision just now. You chose to keep watching. You felt like you were in control. But here is the part nobody tells you. By the time you were aware of that choice, your brain had already made it 7 seconds earlier. 7 seconds. That is not a metaphor. That is not a theory. That is what the data shows. And once you understand what is actually happening inside your skull every time you think you are deciding something, you will never experience a single moment of your day the same way again. In 2008, a neuroscientist named John-Dylan Haynes sat people down in front of a screen at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig and asked them to do something simple. Press a button, either the left one or the right one, whenever they felt like it. And the moment they decided, they had to note which letter was on the screen so that Haynes could pin down the exact second the decision entered their conscious awareness. What he found broke the field open. Using an fMRI scanner watching blood flow shift through the prefrontal cortex, Haynes and his team could predict which button the person was going to press up to 10 seconds before the person had any conscious awareness of choosing. 7 to 10 seconds. The decision was already encoded in the brain's activity before the person felt anything at all. The conscious mind was not making the choice. It was being informed of a choice that had already been made. Your brain is not a decision maker. It is a press secretary. It announces to your conscious awareness what has already been decided in the dark, milliseconds or even seconds before you feel the moment of choosing. This was not a small study in a garage. Haynes published in Nature Neuroscience. The results were replicated. They were debated furiously, and they refused to go away. But Haynes was not the first. Go back to 1983. A physiologist named Benjamin Libet was already asking the same question in a UCLA lab, with far simpler tools but no less devastating results. Libet wired subjects up to an EEG, pointed them at a clock, and told them to flick their wrist whenever they felt the urge. Record the exact position of the clock hand the moment you feel yourself decide. What Libet found was a signal. He called it the readiness potential. It showed up in the motor cortex about 550 milliseconds before the wrist moved. But here is the part that rewired neuroscience. The person's conscious awareness of choosing to move came only about 200 milliseconds before the movement. The brain had fired up the intention to act more than a third of a second before the person felt any intention at all. The decision was already in motion before it surfaced into consciousness. Libet called this disturbing. His colleagues called it a measurement error. Then they ran the study again, and the signal kept arriving before the awareness. Now picture what this means for your day. You wake up and you think about whether to check your phone or not. You feel the deliberation. You feel yourself weighing it, and then you reach for it, or you do not. Either way, somewhere beneath the layer of thinking you can observe, a process had already concluded. The thought you experienced as a decision was actually more like a notification. This is not a fringe idea anymore. It is the current working model for how volition operates in the human brain. The subconscious, which here means the vast majority of your neural activity that never reaches conscious awareness at all, runs billions of calculations per second. It is processing your environment, your body state, your memories, your emotional history, your physical posture, the temperature of the room, the sound behind you that you are not consciously registering. By the time any of that resolves into an action, the conscious narrative self has been handed a finished product and told to take credit. Psychologist Jonathan Haidt at New York University put it this way: the conscious mind is like a rider on an elephant. The rider thinks it is in charge. It can tug on the ears, lean left or right, suggest a direction. But the elephant goes where it wants to go. And the elephant is everything happening beneath conscious awareness. You are the rider. And you have been telling yourself you are driving. Here is where it gets stranger. Your brain does not just make decisions before you know about them. It also confabulates. It makes up reasons after the fact. It creates a story about why you did what you just did. And that story feels completely true even when it is entirely fabricated. Michael Gazzaniga at the University of California, Santa Barbara, spent decades studying split-brain patients, people whose left and right hemispheres had been surgically disconnected to treat severe epilepsy. What he found was that the left hemisphere, which controls language, would invent explanations for behaviors that it had no knowledge of. He would show an image only to the right hemisphere, which controlled the left hand. The patient would perform an action. Then Gazzaniga would ask the left hemisphere why the patient did that. And the left hemisphere, which had seen nothing, would immediately provide a confident, detailed, completely invented explanation. The left hemisphere did not say it did not know. It made something up, and it believed the thing it made up. Gazzaniga named this the interpreter, that voice in your head that narrates your life and gives reasons for your choices. It is not a reporter, it is a storyteller. It is filling in the gaps with whatever sounds most coherent in the moment. This is why you can eat an entire bag of something and not remember deciding to. This is why you feel certain you chose a product for rational reasons when the research shows it was mostly the packaging. This is why you believe you form opinions through reflection when most of them are assembled before conscious reasoning even begins. The disturbing part is not that this is happening. The disturbing part is how seamless it is. There is no seam. There is no moment where you notice the gap between the subconscious process and the conscious story. The story feels like the whole thing. But here is what makes this complicated in ways the headlines always miss. Libet himself pointed out something his critics seized on. Even if the brain's readiness potential fires before conscious awareness, there seems to be a brief window, a veto window. About 150 to 200 milliseconds before the action executes, something can intervene. The conscious mind may not initiate, but it might be able to cancel. He called it free won't rather than free will. You may not choose the impulse, but you might be able to refuse it. This is a small window, and it requires a kind of trained attention that most people are not practicing. But it is there. Meditators, people who have spent years learning to observe their own mental activity before reacting. Your subconscious is not the enemy. It is extraordinarily efficient. It does work your conscious mind could never keep up with. Every step you take without thinking, every face you recognize in under a second, that is your subconscious outrunning every deliberate system you have. The problem is not that it operates beneath awareness. The problem is the story you have been told, that the conscious narrator is in charge. That story is wrong. Your preferences, your gut feelings, the things that feel most deeply chosen. A significant portion of that was assembled by processes you have never observed and cannot directly control. But there is a window, small, real. The fraction of a second between impulse and action when you can still say no. You started watching this before you consciously decided to. That pull came first, but what you do with what you just heard, that part might still be up to you. The elephant is already moving. The question is whether the rider is awake.